The issue of Israel-Palestine is not just a watershed moment on the international scale, as single-payer healthcare is on the domestic scale. But one thing that is probably very personal to both Jen and Jordan, and to me as well, is the fact that Israel has been, I would say at this point, mass murdering journalists for covering what is going on in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And why, Jen? Why would one have to kill a journalist?
Well, otherwise the truth could potentially get out there. But the irony of it with Israel is they put out their own garbage. They promote their own garbage. Their soldiers put out their own war crimes. So, but yeah, they have been intentionally targeting journalists along with doctors and professors and all other sorts of necessary infrastructural type people. But yes, they've killed, I want to say it's like 200 journalists, almost 200 journalists or so since October 7th. It's a lot. It's
201 was the count that I had the other day.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Israel's strike on press van kills 5 Palestinian journalists in Gaza. Journalists are civilians and must always be protected. Blah, blah, blah. The Israeli military bombed a clearly marked, of course it was clearly marked, press vehicle in central Gaza early Thursday, killing 5 journalists in an attack that the Palestinian Journalist Syndicate condemned as a heinous crime. Well, they've committed a lot of heinous crimes, but that hasn't stopped them yet. The journalists killed were Fadai Hasuna, Ibrahim al-Shika Ali, Mohammed al-Lada, Fasil Abu al-Kumasan, and Ayman al-Jahadi. All of them worked for Al-Quds Today, a local TV channel. Middle East Eye reported that the slain journalists were outside Al-Wada Hospital in the Nusrat refugee camp when the van was struck by an Israeli strike earlier this morning. Hani Abruzik, a Middle Eastern Eye reporter at the scene, said the broadcast van was entirely burnt and destroyed. It was fully engulfed in flames. Al Jazeera reported that one of the journalists killed in the strike was waiting for his wife in front of the hospital while she was in labor to give birth to their first child. You become so desensitized to it.
No, I'm not desensitized. I'm enraged. I'm so angry. This is why it is not hard for me to understand violence. This is why. Because of shit like this. It makes me feel so angry. Like I just think you reap what you sow.
Oh, I agree.
I just like, this is, you can't constantly be seeing and hearing this kind of stuff and not feel angry enough to want to hurt people.
The Israeli military claimed without providing evidence that the 5 men were militants posing as journalists. Israel has repeatedly accused journalists working in Gaza of being militants. International law prohibits the targeting of journalists unless they directly participate in hostilities. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, more than 130 Palestinian journalists in Gaza have been killed since Israel's massive assault on the enclave began following the Hamas attack on October 7th of 23. CPJ's Middle East and North Africa program said Thursday that it's devastated by the reports that 5 journalists and media workers were killed inside their broadcasting vehicle by an Israeli strike. Journalists are civilians and must be protected. Yeah, we've been hearing that for far too long. A Guardian investigation released earlier this year found that amid a loosening of the IDF's interpretation of the laws of war, of course, after the deadly Hamas-led attacks, some within the IDF appear to have viewed journalists working in Gaza for outlets controlled by or affiliated with Hamas to be legitimate military targets. So as you can imagine, Israel does not believe in international law.
No.
It does not believe in the UN.
And and the truth is, the thing is this, they have no honor. They have no honor. And people that have no honor, you can't reason. You can't have agreements. They won't abide by laws. They won't abide by any sort of contractual arrangement. They won't abide by treaties. They won't abide by anything because they have no honor. So when we're, the only thing that's weird to me, quite honestly, is that journalists and medical people or their spokespeople thereof at this point expect anything other than that being a targeting mechanism. When you put on a press jacket and you are in the West Bank or in Gaza, that's just putting a target on your back. And it's the same if you look like you're a physician. And so as disgusting as it is, at this point, have we not gotten to where we know that it makes people inherently unsafer, that maybe we shouldn't be putting that out there anymore? I feel the same way about World Central Kitchen. I feel the same way about the UN people. It's like, clearly at this point, can't we just acknowledge that Israel has no honor, doesn't respect laws, doesn't respect anything? So why advertise what you are to them? Like, it's not like it keeps you safe in any way. There's no point.
My question is, how do they think this is going to end? That's the bigger question, Jen.
Well, I know how it's going to end. I told you how it's going to end when it started. And it's really just, it's like watching a train wreck happening in slow motion.
I think so. But when it ends, it's going to be bad.
It's already very bad. And it's going to continue to get bad. I believe at this point that empire is just waiting till they can just sufficiently bulldoze a whole bunch of dead bodies into like the Mediterranean and start over. So they're going to wait this out until they can just completely just, go in and level the entire region.
Can we close with your thoughts on the fact that there is going to be sort of a shunning of the Jewish community in particular in this country going forward? That they really do not understand how much people hate them now. The fact that especially the ones that have had the opportunity to speak up and refuse to do it, whether it's because of economic purposes, which I'm sure is a primary driver in that equation, political, whatever it is. People know what's going on and they refuse to say anything about it.
Well, with good reason. Look at consequences. You've got a lot of people losing their jobs. You've got people, like, especially in academic circles, you've got a lot of consequences for people speaking truth to power, and specifically regarding anything to do with the Zionist state. But my thoughts about, where this ultimately is going is pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. And yes, they're going to keep expanding. They're going into Syria. They want to go into Lebanon. They are really trying to create this greater Israel, and they can keep doing that. But at the end of the day, they'll fail, just like empire is failing. At the end of the day, without the United States being what it is on the global stage, Israel is going to be a speck, and it'll be but just a mere nuisance in history. But they're going to keep going until they physically can.
Yeah.
But economically, and especially for people, if you're not really paying attention to what's going on with BRICS, just know that economically is where we're ultimately as empire going to fall. It's not going to come down to military. Nobody's going to take out the United States militarily. That's just silly. But economically, when we fall as empire, that will also be the end of the Zionist state. So that's the only thing that keeps the Zio state afloat. So we're just basically waiting out to see how long it's going to take for empire to implode.
As Robert says, and this is probably the biggest element of why the United States does not put a stop to this, is because we are a completely broken republic that is captured by corporate special interests. And the Israel lobby is as powerful as any that exists. And they do not mess around. They are ruthless. They are,
I saw somebody in the chat ask about if Zionism comes from anti-Semitism. And it doesn't come from it, but it was facilitated by it, and it's now perpetuating it. It's facilitated by it, and it perpetuates it. Also, the whole concept of Zionism is anti-Semitic, but anyway, they will inevitably fail. Right now, the whole world is against them. The whole world is against the United States. It's just that right now, as a dominant economic force, it doesn't really matter. We get to still do what we want to do anyway. But the minute that shifts, Israel will cease to be.